For Don Marcello Moretti, power was everything, until a child's life was in his hands. To protect her, he must start a war with his own blood and marry the woman who is his greatest enemy. Rain carved silver threads through the midnight air, drumming against cracked brick and puddled asphalt. New York never slept, but tonight its heartbeat felt wrong, too fast, too frightened. Sofia's shoes slapped against the ground, splashing through oily water. 8 years old, lungs burning, she clutched the stuffed rabbit pressed to her chest, as if its worn ears could protect her. Behind her came the echo of heavy boots, men shouting, the rasp of a car door slamming. "Come here, little one," a voice barked. She darted between overflowing trash cans, breath hitching, heart like thunder. Her mother's last words before school replayed, "Wait for me outside, don't talk to strangers." But the strangers had come anyway. A flash of headlights sliced through the rain, tires screeched, a black car blocked the mouth of the alley. For a moment, everything froze. Sofia's tiny frame trembling in the glow, the men slowing, wary. Then the car door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, coat collar turned up against the storm. His shoes clicked once on the wet concrete. Even in the half-light, his presence shifted the air. Don Marcello Moretti didn't need to speak for danger to move with him. "Back away," he said, voice low, accented, commanding. The kidnappers hesitated. Everyone in the city had heard of him, the ghost who ruled the underground with quiet precision. One man sneered, raising a pistol. "You don't scare us, old man." The reply was a motion too fast to track. Metal gleamed, a single shot cracked, echoing off the walls. The gun fell first, then the man. The second attacker lunged, but Marcello's coat flared like a shadow, a twist, a strike, and the fight ended with the man sprawled against the wall, groaning. Silence swallowed the alley, except for the rain. Sofia blinked through tears. The stranger crouched, dark hair slick with water, eyes the color of smoke and storm. "You hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, mute. He reached out, careful, as if touching something fragile. "Who did this?" She only whimpered, gripping the rabbit tighter. Lightning flashed. Its button eye caught the light, revealing a small gold locket tangled in its ribbon. Marcello noticed it, gently lifted the chain. The locket clicked open. Inside, the tiny photo of a woman, hazel-eyed, proud, unforgettable. Isabella Lane. Memory struck like the crack of the gun he'd just fired. 5 years ago, that same woman had printed headlines that nearly burned his empire to the ground. The journalist who asked questions no one dared. The one who'd looked at him across an interview table and seen the man beneath the legend. And now her daughter stood trembling before him. "Where's your mother?" he asked softly. Sofia's lips quivered. "They said she'd be gone if I screamed." Marcello's jaw tightened. He took off his coat, wrapped it around her shoulders, and lifted her into his arms. The weight was nothing. What pressed heavy was the sudden pulse in his chest, a mixture of fury and something dangerously close to concern. He carried her to the car. His driver stared, wide-eyed. "Boss, you okay?" "Drive." Rain hammered the windshield as the city blurred past, neon lights smearing into streaks of red and blue. Sofia leaned against him, shivering, whispering about her mother, about men in black coats who waited outside her school. Each word sank deeper than a bullet. Marcello's thoughts twisted. Why Isabella's child? Why tonight? Coincidence didn't exist in his world. He pulled out his phone, dialing with steady fingers. "Vince," he said when his lieutenant answered. "Clean the alley. 2 men down. Find who sent them." "Understood. Anything else?" Marcello looked at the sleeping child in his arms. Her small hand still clutched the rabbit. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her forehead, and for the first time in years, something unfamiliar stirred, a flicker of protectiveness he didn't welcome. He clicked open the locket again, staring at Isabella's face until the photo blurred in the car's motion. The woman who'd once sworn she'd never need a man like him. Now her daughter carried his coat. The rain eased to a whisper as they crossed the bridge, New York's skyline rising like teeth through fog. Marcello leaned back, eyes half closed, mind already calculating. Whoever wanted this child had crossed a line that even the underworld respected. When the car stopped at his penthouse tower, he stepped out first, scanning the shadows before lifting Sofia again. His men pretended not to notice the softness in his hold. Inside, he handed her to a housekeeper with orders to keep her safe, feed her, and say nothing. He walked to the window, rain streaking down the glass like ink. Below, sirens wailed, late, useless. His reflection stared back. A man built from rules, debts, and silence. Yet somewhere inside that armor, something had cracked. He dialed again. Vince picked up instantly. Boss? Marcello's voice dropped to a growl, calm as a knife sliding from its sheath. Find the mother, he said. He paused, eyes still on the locket glinting in his palm. And bring her to me. Alive. Lightning flared across the skyline, painting his face in white fire. Behind him, the locket snapped shut on Isabella's picture, and the rain outside began again, as if New York itself understood that the hunt had just begun. Morning crawled in beneath a bruised sky, the city still soaked from the storm. Inside Lenox Hill Hospital, fluorescent lights hummed over the corridors, sharp and sterile against the lingering scent of rain and disinfectant. Isabella Lane pushed through the sliding doors, coat clinging to her from the mist outside, press badge forgotten somewhere in her purse. Her voice cut through the hallway before she even reached the reception desk. I'm looking for my daughter, Sofia Lane. She was brought here last night. Ursus glanced up, startled by the edge in her tone, by the fear underneath it. Ma'am, please calm down. I am calm, Isabella snapped, though her hands trembled. Just tell me where she is. The nurse typed, frowned, then hesitated. She's under private protection, ma'am. A Mr. Moretti signed the intake. The name hit like a thrown stone. For a heartbeat, Isabella couldn't breathe. Moretti. Of course. She should have known that any shadow cast over her life would lead back to him. Without waiting for permission, she strode past security, heels striking the tile like the ticking of a clock counting down. 2 guards tried to stop her at the corridor that led to the private ward. Ma'am, you can't. Watch me. She shoved past, her reporter's instincts burning through fear. The door at the end of the hall stood half open, soft lamplight spilling out. Inside, she caught the low murmur of a man's voice and the smaller sound of a child answering in sleepy relief. Her hand trembled on the doorframe as she stepped in. Sofia lay curled under a white blanket, pale but unharmed. Beside her stood Marcello Moretti, suit immaculate, posture carved from steel, eyes unreadable. He turned as if he had expected her. Isabella Lane. Her breath came out sharp. What are you doing here? His gaze dropped briefly to Sofia, then returned to her. Protecting what's mine for the moment. Yours? She hissed. She's my daughter. She was nearly taken last night. I know that, she shot back. And you think I'd trust you of all people to protect her? The man whose name fills half my notebooks in red ink? He didn't flinch. Those men weren't mine. They wore the Rossi mark. The names scraped at her memory. Old stories, rival families, bodies that disappeared under the East River. Then call the police. Marcello's expression didn't change. The police already served someone, just not you. For a long moment, they stood in the stillness, the monitor's soft beeping marking every heartbeat between them. Isabella looked at her daughter again. The child's fingers were wrapped around a stuffed rabbit, Marcello's coat draped over the chair nearby. She wanted to pull Sofia close, to run, to vanish, but the way Marcello stood there, silent, composed, every movement measured, made it clear she wasn't leaving easily. Whatever this is, she said, her voice lower now, stay away from her. He took a step closer. If I could, I would, but whoever sent those men will come again, and next time they won't miss. You think I'm going to believe you? No, he said quietly, but you'll believe the next bullet when it finds her. Her throat closed around words she couldn't force out. She wanted to scream at him, to throw every accusation she'd ever written. Instead, she felt the old fury rising, the same heat that had fueled her articles years ago, when she'd sworn to expose men like him. Why would the Rossi clan want my daughter? He slipped his hands into his pockets, as though weighing how much truth she deserved. Because they know who her mother is. You made enemies, Isabella, some of them mine. Her pulse pounded in her ears. You think this is because of me? I don't think, he replied. I know. She opened her mouth to argue, but Sofia stirred. The little girl blinked at them, confusion flickering before recognition lit her face. Mommy? Isabella was at her side in an instant, bending to kiss her forehead. I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe now. Marcello watched silently. The tenderness between mother and child was something alien to him, something dangerous. Sofia's small voice drifted through the quiet. He helped me. Isabella froze, turning toward him again. Why? He looked down at the child, then back at her mother. Because someone had to. The simplicity of the words unsettled her more than any threat. She rose slowly, facing him fully. Thank you, she said tightly. Now leave us alone. I can't do that. Shy. He laughed once, bitter. Of course not. His phone buzzed. He listened for a moment, then his jaw set. They've already found this place. What? He moved to the window, scanning the street below. Shadows shifted around parked cars. Two men lingered too long near the entrance. Get away from the glass, he ordered. Don't you dare give me commands. The next second swallowed her words in a roar. Light flared outside. The shockwave punched through the window with a scream of metal and glass. Instinct took over. Marcello lunged across the room, grabbing Isabella's wrist, dragging her down as shards rained around them. Sofia cried out. The alarms howled through the corridor. Smoke curled through the broken frame, bitter and gray. Marcello's voice was low but fierce against the chaos, breath close to her ear. They're not after me, he said. They're after her. Outside, flames painted the night orange, and in the reflection of shattered glass, Isabella saw her own terror mirrored in Marcello's eyes, a truth neither of them wanted to face, and a danger already climbing the hospital stairs. The smell of smoke lingered faintly in the hospital corridor long after the alarms faded, clinging to hair, clothes, and skin like a reminder. Marcello guided Isabella and Sofia down the service stairwell, silent except for the soft patter of her daughter's tiny feet behind them. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, sirens, tires on wet asphalt, distant shouts, but the threat had followed them too closely to be ignored. Marcello's car waited several blocks away, engine low, headlights slicing through the mist. Sofia's arms were wrapped around her rabbit, her legs tired from running, yet she didn't let go. Every so often, she peeked up at Marcello, eyes wide, uncertain, testing him. You don't have to be afraid, he murmured, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Hi. His voice was softer than it had been all night, yet carried the weight of authority. Sofia blinked at him, still unsure. Are you really gonna protect me? He shifted in his seat, hand brushing against hers for a moment. Always. She nodded, trusting him enough to let go of the question, but not enough to relax completely. That trust had to grow, like fragile glass formed in fire. The villa they reached was hidden from the main road, perched on a cliff that overlooked the city's jagged skyline. A long driveway, lined with thick hedges and stone statues, half swallowed by creeping ivy, led to wrought iron gates that opened at Marcello's gesture. The place felt like it had been waiting for them, silent, secure, removed from everything that could hurt Sofia tonight. Inside, the house smelled of old wood, polished marble, and a faint trace of cologne. Marcello gestured for Isabella to sit, while his men moved like shadows, checking locks, cameras, and exits. Sofia wandered cautiously, her small hands tracing the edges of furniture, her gaze drawn to the view outside. The city stretching endlessly, oblivious to the danger lurking just beyond its lights. Uncle Mark? She whispered suddenly, testing the name. Marcello's eyes flicked to her. He wasn't used to being called anything so soft. That's fine, he said after a pause, his lips twitching almost imperceptibly. Her laughter was quiet, a fragile note that filled the tension. She perched on the sofa, hugging the rabbit close. I like you, Uncle Mark. He said nothing, letting the words sink into the silence. He wasn't sure whether to feel proud or uneasy. Protecting a child wasn't supposed to make a man feel something, something unrecognizable. Isabella stayed standing near the window, arms crossed, eyes scanning the darkness outside. The storm had passed, leaving wet streets shimmering under streetlights like spilled ink. She kept her distance from Marcello, yet she couldn't stop noticing him. The lines around his eyes, the way his hands moved when he adjusted his coat, the quiet command, "I," in his posture. "This is temporary," she said finally, voice clipped. "We stay here until I can figure out our next move." "Temporary or not," he replied, "you don't leave my sight, not until I know your daughter is safe." The tension between them coiled like a spring, sharp, electric. Words hung unsaid, neither willing to give ground. She hated the control he seemed to wield, yet hated even more the relief she felt knowing he could protect her. Hours passed. Sofia grew more comfortable, playing quietly in a corner, arranging her toys on the carpet as if the world outside didn't exist. Marcello watched her carefully, noting every twitch of her fingers, the way her small shoulders hunched when she concentrated. A quiet knock on the door made him freeze. He went to it, opening just enough to see one of his men, Vince, his most trusted spy, returning from the shadows outside. His expression was unreadable, lips tight. "We've learned something," Vince said, stepping fully into the room. "About the child's father." Marcello's gaze sharpened. "Go on." "The Rossi family. They had a ledger, a flash drive. Sofia's father stole it before he disappeared. It's dangerous. Whoever holds it controls a lot of leverage, and the father hid it somewhere. Clever. Disguised." Marcello's jaw tightened. "Where?" "Inside one of her toys. She brought it everywhere, but she doesn't know what it is." Vince's eyes flicked to Sofia, who was humming softly, arranging her stuffed animals. Marcello approached carefully, kneeling so he was at her level. "Sofia, sweetheart, may I see your rabbit?" The girl handed it over without hesitation, trusting in a way that had only begun to form. Marcello took it gently, examining the seams, feeling the weight hidden inside. He pressed a small button hidden under the fabric. The seams split with a soft pop, inside wrapped in a thin layer of claws. Something metallic glinted. His fingers brushed over it, pausing as recognition struck. A flash drive. Slightly blood-stained, worn from years of handling. A tiny label peeked through the fabric. Smudged, but legible. He read the letters aloud under his breath, voice tight. "The Moretti file." Marcello stared at it, the weight of its significance pressing down. Every strategy he'd made, every plan he'd considered, suddenly shifted. The Rossi family had wanted this. The attack tonight had been a warning, and now it was in his hands. He looked at Sofia, eyes soft but mind calculating. She was blissfully unaware of the danger she carried in her lap. One innocent child, and yet the entire underworld would have killed to get this. Isabella, watching from across the room, saw the tension in him, the dark flicker in his eyes that had nothing to do with anger, something older, deeper, protective, and terrifying. She felt the weight of what he understood that she did not yet fully grasp. Marcello closed the rabbit carefully, holding it against his chest for a moment. Every line of his body suggested readiness, anticipation. Every muscle tensed as though the room itself were a battlefield waiting to erupt. Sofia's small voice drifted through the silence. "Will they come back for it?" Marcello's eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. "Yes," he said softly, "and we won't let them get it." The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, shadows of the city flickering through the tall windows. The villa was silent now, holding its breath. Even the walls seemed to recognize the danger that had settled inside them like a predator. Marcello stood, moving toward Isabella, the flash drive still hidden safely in his palm. The air between them thrummed with tension, not just the unspoken attraction that simmered, but the knowledge that whatever came next would be violent, swift, and merciless. Vince lingered near the doorway, glancing at the girl, then at Marcello. "We should plan our next move," he said carefully. Marcello nodded, eyes lingering on Sofia one last time before focusing on the adult world around him. "Yes," he said, voice low, "and we do it right." The villa seemed suddenly alive with shadows, the threat outside pressing close. The child's laughter, fragile and unaware, echoed through the halls. Marcello's hands flexed around the rabbit, the secret inside weighing heavier than any weapon he owned. He whispered to himself, almost a warning, "They'll come, and they'll regret it." Marcello ripped open the stuffed rabbit with a practiced hand, and the tiny metallic object slipped free. A blood-stained flash drive glinted in the dim lamplight, the label barely legible. The Moretti file. The villa seemed to grow colder in an instant, and in that quiet, Sofia's innocence became the most dangerous thing in the city. Marcello stared at the flash drive in his palm, the weight of it heavier than any gun he had ever held. Its metal casing was cold, smooth, innocent-looking, but the secrets inside were anything but. He slipped it into the safety of his private study, shutting the door behind him, shutting out the warmth and laughter of the villa that had grown too quiet too soon. Sofia slept on the couch nearby, her breathing even and trusting. Her small hands twitched occasionally around the stuffed rabbit, the one hiding truths no child should carry. Marcello's gaze lingered on her, protective, calculating, and in some strange corner of himself, reluctant to move away. He plugged the flash drive into the computer, fingers steady, eyes scanning. The screen came alive with files, folders, documents, and photos, all marked with dates, names, and signatures. Politicians, police officers, judges, every one of them connected by invisible threads of greed and betrayal. The kind of corruption that wasn't whispered about in back rooms. It was printed in headlines, but no one dared publish it. Marcello's eyes narrowed. Then he saw it. The name that made his blood turn cold. Luca Moretti, his brother. A lifetime of rivalry, of betrayal, of unspoken resentments and blood debts came flooding back. Luca had always wanted the family empire, always resented Marcello's iron rule, always thought himself smarter, faster, better. And now he was in the center of this web of corruption, using Marcello's own empire as a stepping stone. Marcello sank into his chair, jaw tight, mind whirring. Loyalty to family had always been his code, but justice demanded action. Isabella stepped into the study then, hesitating, sensing the storm in the air. "What is it?" Her voice was soft, but edged with steel. Marcello didn't look up. "It's your daughter's father, and my brother." She froze. "What?" He finally met her eyes, dark and hard. "Luca Moretti. He's behind the Rossi attack. He's connected to the corruption, to everything this flash drive reveals, and now he's aware that I know." Her stomach knotted. "So he'll come for her, for Sofia." Marcello's hands tightened around the edge of the desk. "Yes, and I can't let him take her." She swallowed, tension coiling in her chest. Fear and frustration warred inside her. "Then let me leave with her. I'll take her somewhere safe. I don't need your protection." Marcello's voice was low, controlled, but laced with something sharp. "You don't understand. If she leaves, if I lose her, I can't protect her. And I won't forgive myself if something happens." She stepped closer, anger flaring. "I understand perfectly. You want to control everything. You think you can keep her safe, but she's my daughter, not your pawn." Marcello rose, moving toward her, and for the first time since she'd entered his world, they were eye to eye. The distance between them wasn't just physical, it was charged with tension, raw and palpable. A dangerous electricity hummed between them, born of anger, fear, and something neither of them could name yet. "You don't get it," he said, voice low, steady, but not without heat. "I won't let her die, not on my watch, and if that means keeping her from you, then so be it." "You can't." A sharp sound outside cut through their argument, a car door slamming, footsteps on gravel. Marcello's head snapped toward the window, eyes scanning. Isabella's hands trembled at his chest, frustration and worry mingling. "You see? You don't get to decide everything." Marcello's eyes softened for a fraction of a second before steel returned. "I already have to decide." The villa's corridors hummed with the quiet movement of Marcello's men, every shadow a potential threat, every corner a calculated risk. He gestured toward the door. "Vince, guard her. No one leaves." Isabella's mouth opened, but before she could argue, Marcello moved with him toward the window. The city beyond shimmered, indifferent, unaware of the storm converging on the villa. Sofia stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy?" Her voice was small, sleepy, unsure. Isabella's anger softened, replaced with the maternal instinct that had been driving her every action for the past few nights. She bent down to smooth Sofia's hair. "I'm right here, sweetheart. Always." Marcello's gaze lingered on the two of them. He understood something then that he had been trying to ignore, the fragility of what he protected. This child, this woman, was vulnerable in ways he wasn't. Yet their presence stirred something dangerous in him, a drive to shield them that he had never felt before. The study phone rang. Its sharp ring broke the stillness, cutting through the tension like a blade. Marcello's hand hovered, hesitation brief, almost imperceptible. He picked up the receiver, listening. His lips moved, but the words were swallowed by the static, by the sound of his own pulse in his ears. Isabella's heart leapt in her chest. "Who is it?" Marcello's face darkened, muscles tightening. The room seemed to shrink around them, shadows lengthening, the storm outside replaced by an internal one. His eyes narrowed, jaw set, and the world seemed to tilt. "Luca?" he said, voice low, sharp, ice in the steel. "He has her." Isabella's hands flew to her mouth. "Sofia?" The little girl, oblivious to the words spoken, stretched and yawned, her small body curling closer to her mother. The knowledge that she was in immediate danger made the room spin, every heartbeat a drum of dread. Marcello hung up the phone, his hand trembling only slightly as he slammed it down. Fury, calculation, and desperation churned behind his eyes. The calm, untouchable Don Marcello Moretti that the city feared was replaced by a man who had just realized that blood ran through his own family, and that the child he had sworn to protect had been snatched into his brother's hands. Isabella's chest tightened. She took a step toward him, but he held up a hand, his gaze scanning the villa, the exits, the shadows. He could not afford distraction, not now. "She's gone," he whispered, though the words were edged with power, determination, and a hint of the rage that had always defined him. Isabella's knees felt weak, panic threatening to pull her to the floor. "What are we going to do?" Marcello didn't answer immediately. His mind raced, plotting every step, every angle, every possible outcome. Loyalty, justice, family, and danger collided inside him. The past wasn't dead. It was alive, vicious, and it had just taken Sofia. He looked at Isabella, eyes burning with intensity. "We go to him," he said finally. "We get her back, and Luca will pay for every second he touched her." The villa seemed impossibly quiet after his words, the only sound the soft breathing of a child, unaware that the storm outside had become a storm within their lives. Marcello clenched his fists, the blood-stained flash drive in his pocket a reminder of the stakes, a tether to the darkness that had already begun to move. He felt Isabella's gaze on him, the mix of fear, anger, and something unspoken, something dangerous in its intensity. They didn't speak, but the air between them was thick with tension, resolved and charged. The little rabbit sat on the table, innocent, silent, holding secrets that had already cost too much. Marcello's mind raced, calculating paths, preparing for war. He could hear Luca's voice in his imagination, smug and confident, mocking him. But tonight, Marcello promised himself, nothing would mock him. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside. Rain began again, tapping against the windows, thrumming like the heartbeat of a city that refused to sleep, a city that now held a child hostage in the hands of a man who had once been family. Marcello's coat hung from his shoulders, his stance solid, commanding. "We move now," he said, voice low, cold, controlled. Every second counted. Every choice could cost a life. He turned to Isabella, who nodded, her fear tempered by resolve. Together they prepared for the confrontation that would define their nights, their days, and the fragile trust they had only begun to form. The phone buzzed again. Marcello answered, voice sharp and controlled. The words on the other end cut through him like ice. Your daughter is with Luca. He has her, boss. He won't let her go without a game. Marcello's jaw tightened. The villa trembled with the weight of that truth, and in that moment he knew that nothing, no loyalty, no law, no power, could stop what was coming next. Marcello's car tore through the night, tires screaming on wet asphalt as the city lights blurred into streaks of neon. Isabella held Sofia close, tiny arms wrapped around her neck, hair plastered to her face from the rain that had returned in sheets. The child was silent now, exhausted, trusting Marcello more than she had ever trusted anyone. Inside the armored vehicle, Marcello's mind raced. Every corner, every alley, every shadow in the Rossi territory had been memorized. He knew the city's underbelly like the lines on his own hands, but tonight. And it was personal. Luca had crossed a line, and Sofia had paid the price. Stay low, Marcello said, voice calm but lethal. Hold her close, Isabella. She nodded, white-knuckled, but her eyes were fierce. I can do more than stay low. He allowed a ghost of a smile. Then do it. The vehicle stopped several blocks from the Rossi compound. Black, unmarked, towering walls surrounded the place, and armed men patrolled like predators waiting for prey. Marcello's men spilled from the car, moving with precision, shadows among shadows, silent as death. Isabella followed, carrying Sofia in her arms, heart hammering, adrenaline sharp. The weight of the child made her movement slower, but determination made her faster. Every instinct screamed, protect, survive, fight. Marcello led the way, gun drawn, eyes sweeping every corner. We go in fast, we go in silent. We get her and leave. A door slammed in the distance, voices shouted. The first shot cracked the night like thunder. Isabella flinched, instinctively pressing Sofia closer. The firefight erupted. Bullets ricocheted off concrete walls, echoing through the narrow alleys. Marcello moved like liquid, precise and unstoppable. Each motion calculated, every shot fatal. Men fell around him, their attacks no match for the cold efficiency of a man defending everything he cared about. Isabella dropped to the ground instinctively, shielding Sofia as gunfire sliced the air above them. Her courage surprised even herself, each movement a proof of her love, each heartbeat a vow that she would not let harm touch her child. A figure appeared in the shadows. Luca. Marcello's blood ran cold. Well, well, Luca drawled, voice smooth, taunting, echoing across the courtyard. The great Marcello Moretti, all dressed up and nowhere to go. Marcello's eyes narrowed, every muscle in his body coiled. Luca, he said low, dangerous, the syllable itself a threat. Luca stepped forward, arms open as if to mock affection. You're predictable, brother, always protecting what isn't yours. But tonight, the Rossi family and I have a plan. You lose, Marcello. Everything. Not tonight, Marcello growled, stepping closer, gun raised. The first explosion rocked the building, sending dust and debris raining down. Isabella pressed Sofia to the ground instinctively, their hearts leaping. She caught sight of Marcello moving through the chaos, moving like a ghost, each step closer to Luca. Shots rang out. Marcello dove behind a crate, firing without hesitation. One of Luca's men, a massive, ruthless figure, charged at him. Marcello's gun cracked, the shot precise, and the man crumpled instantly. Isabella's hands were shaking, but she held Sofia tighter. She peeked over her shoulder, calculating, watching Marcello as he moved like a storm through the courtyard. "Mommy," Sofia whispered, frightened. "I'm here," Isabella said fiercely, pressing her body in front of her child. "I've got you." Marcello's attention snapped to Luca. The brother smirked, raising a pistol casually. "You always underestimate me," Luca said. Marcello's finger tightened on the trigger. "And I never forgive." He fired. Luca's right-hand man, a large, scarred man with eyes like coal, fell to the ground, lifeless. Blood soaked the concrete. Marcello's chest tightened as he kept moving, each step measured, calculated. But Luca vanished into the shadows, disappearing before Marcello could reach him. His laughter carried through the night like a knife. Isabella's breath came in ragged gasps. "He got away," she whispered. Marcello's eyes blazed. Not for long. Sofia peeked at him wide-eyed. "Is he coming back?" Marcello shook his head slightly, though his jaw remained tight. "Yes, and we'll be ready." They backed away from the courtyard, taking cover in the ruined building. Dust and smoke clung to the air. Isabella kept Sofia pressed to her chest, eyes darting around, nerves taut, every sense alert. Marcello moved close to Isabel, their bodies brushing briefly in the chaos. The touch was electric, almost intimate, a spark born from danger and the shared fight to protect the child. Neither spoke, but the air between them was charged with unspoken words, desire, and tension. A phone rang, Luca's voice, clear, mocking, chilling. Marcello snatched the device from his pocket. "Brother," Luca's voice carried over the line, smooth, venomous. "You'll never see the girl again, unless you trade Isabella." The words cut through Marcello like ice. His blood ran hot, fury and dread colliding. Isabella gasped, tightening her hold on Sofia, her heart hammering. Marcello gritted his teeth, the weight of the moment pressing down. The night seemed to darken, shadows stretching, the world holding its breath as he considered every angle, every possibility. Luca's laughter echoed in his ears, a sound designed to taunt, to weaken, to provoke. But Marcello Moretti had never backed down, never surrendered, and he would not start tonight. The child whimpered in Isabella's arms. Her fear was palpable, and yet she was brave, holding on to her mother's warmth as the world around them burned with danger. Marcello's hand tightened around the phone. "You'll pay for this," he growled, voice low, lethal, controlled. "I swear it." The streets outside were silent now, the aftermath of battle lingering. Smoke drifted from burning debris. The Rossi territory seemed alive, watching, waiting. Isabella's chest heaved. We can't just let him have her." Marcello's eyes burned into hers. "We won't. We take her back, whatever it costs." Sofia stirred again, rubbing her eyes. She didn't understand the stakes, didn't know the hatred, the betrayal, the darkness that surrounded them. All she knew was fear and the need for safety. Marcello knelt, eye to eye with her. "I promise, Sofia," he said softly. "You will be safe." The night pressed in around them. Shadows moved like whispers of death, and the city felt alive with threats that had only just begun. Marcello's men prepared silently, weapons checked, exits calculate. Every second a heartbeat closer to confrontation. The villa and the city beyond had become a battlefield, and the lines were drawn. Every nerve in his body screamed, every instinct demanded action. Luca's words hung in the air, poisoned, taunting, daring him to fail. Marcello looked to Isabella, her determination matching his own. Together they were a storm waiting to strike, a force that refused to yield. Luca's voice returned, cold and taunting through the speaker. "Trade her, or you'll never see Sofia again. Make your choice, Marcello." The words echoed through the rubble-strewn courtyard. Marcello's eyes narrowed, jaw tight, fists clenching around the phone. The air seemed to thicken, charged with the promise of violence, desperation, and a choice that could destroy everything he had ever fought to protect. The villa was silent after Luca's call, but silence carried a weight heavier than any gunfire. Marcello sat on the edge of the study desk, phone still clutched in his hand, eyes burning with rage and calculation. The world beyond the walls had become a storm, and he could feel it pressing in from every direction. Isabella stood near the window, Sofia asleep in her arms, her back rigid, her gaze distant. Her jaw was tight, teeth clenched. "We can't fight this, Marcello," she said finally, voice trembling but firm. "If you go after Luca, if you risk everything, you'll lose her." Marcello looked up slowly, eyes sharp. "Lose her? She's not yours to lose. She's mine to protect." "My daughter is mine!" Isabella snapped, spinning toward him, heat rising. "She's my life, not a pawn in your war. I won't let you drag us into your vengeance." Marcello rose, closing the space between them, the air thick with tension, charged like a storm before the lightning strikes. Do you think I care about war? I care about her, about both of you. You think I would surrender her too, Luca? To the Rossi family? Never! Isabella's hands shook, tightening around Sofia's sleeping form. And if we die trying? If we fail? I can't live knowing I let my child die because of your pride. The words cut him deeper than any bullet. His fists clenched, jaw tight. He hated her fear, yet understood it. He hated her defiance, yet needed it. For all his power, all his reach, he had never learned how to navigate a mother's love. But tonight, he saw it, raw and untamed. You don't understand what it means to be alone, he said, voice dropping, almost vulnerable. I've built walls around myself because everyone I've loved either betrayed me or was taken. I won't lose her too. Isabella's eyes softened, shock and compassion flashing through her anger. You think I don't know guilt? I should have never left her alone. I should have been there. She might not even be here if I had. Her voice broke. Marcello stepped closer, closing the distance, their hands brushing, almost touching. The air seemed to vibrate around them, electricity crackling between rage and desperation, fear and desire. You're not alone, he whispered, almost too softly to be heard, yet impossible to ignore. Not tonight, not ever again, if I can stop it. Isabella's breath hitched. Her defenses wavered. The fear, the tension, the exhaustion, it all converged. She let him draw near, let the walls between them fall, brick by brick, and then it happened. A kiss, fierce, desperate, a collision of pent-up emotion and need. It was not gentle. It was not patient. It was fire and storm, a confession of loneliness, of guilt, of longing. Sofia stirred in her sleep, but did not wake, cradled safely in her mother's arms. The night stretched, heavy and endless, a sanctuary from the violence, a momentary escape from the world outside. Marcello's hands held Isabella close, as if the world could end and he would protect her from everything. Her hands rested against his chest, feeling the strength, the vulnerability, the man he had never let anyone see. Hours passed. Words were whispered, confessions spilling like the rain that had once soaked New York streets. The storm of their lives had collided, and in its aftermath they found fragile connection, fleeting but profound. Morning came like an intrusion, pale sunlight spilling across the marble floors, the quiet broken only by the low hum of the city beyond the gates. Marcello stirred, alert as ever, eyes scanning, mind calculating. The warmth of the night clung to him, a fleeting reminder of humanity in a life defined by shadows. Isabella rose, brushing her hair from her face, adjusting her coat. Sofia's small voice called from the sofa, pulling her from her thoughts. "Mommy?" "I'm here, sweetheart," she said, voice steady, hiding the fear that still gnawed at her. Marcello's phone buzzed, a subtle vibration against the desk. He answered, the line crackling with static. Vince's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Boss, they know your location. Someone tipped them off. They're coming." Marcello's eyes darkened, every muscle tensing. "Who?" I don't know, boss," Vince admitted. "But it's urgent. Move fast." Isabella turned sharply. "Someone betrayed us?" Her pulse quickened, panic threading her voice. Marcello didn't answer. His mind was already racing, plans, exits, weapons, contingencies. He moved with precision, gathering his men, checking every room, securing every angle. Sofia stirred, rubbing her eyes, sensing the tension. Isabella pulled her closer, whispering soothing words. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Uncle Mark is here. We'll be safe." The villa's walls, once sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Shadows clung to the corners, the halls whispering threats that had been whispered in gunfire and blood. Every second stretched, heavy with anticipation, every sound a potential herald of disaster. Marcello's hand rested on Isabella's shoulder, firm, commanding, yet not without a lingering tenderness. "Stay with her. Don't move unless I say." She nodded, heart pounding, aware of the storm building outside. The first sound of gunfire shattered the pod. Morning calm. Glass exploded in jagged shards as bullets tore through windows. Sofia screamed, small and terrified, clutching her mother. Marcello's eyes blazed. "Down!" he shouted. Isabella pressed herself and Sofia to the floor, the shards raining around them. The air smelled of smoke, metal, and fear. The villa shook under the impact, every wall rattling, every heartbeat synchronized with danger. Marcello moved like a predator, calculated, lethal. Each step measured, each shot fired with precision. He was everywhere and nowhere, a shadow of vengeance, a storm incarnate, yet always aware of Sofia's small, terrified presence. Isabella's hands trembled, pressing Sofia closer. "Mommy's right here. You're safe, I promise." The sound of doors being forced open echoed through the halls. Figures in black moved with deadly intent, filling the corridors. Marcello's men returned fire, a deadly symphony, bullets sparking against marble and stone. Every second was a test, every heartbeat a gamble. Isabella felt herself drawn to him, not just by need, but by the closeness, the shared desperation, the dangerous intimacy born in the chaos. Marcello's voice cut through the cacophony. "Cover her! Protect her at all costs!" The villa became a battlefield, echoes of gunfire, screams, and shouts mixing with Sofia's terrified cries. Isabella's heart threatened to burst, yet she held on to the child, held on to the only thread of hope left in this inferno. Through the chaos, Marcello's eyes never left her and the girl. He moved with lethal grace, dispatching threats with precision, a guardian angel wrapped in darkness. A window shattered nearby, sending shards across the marble floor. Sofia screamed again, clutching her mother. Isabella pressed her body against the child, tears running freely, fear mingled with adrenaline, with something else, something she hadn't expected in the storm of their lives. Trust. Marcello's hand brushed hers as he passed, a silent reassurance, a tether to stability in the chaos. Their eyes met for a brief second, understanding, agreement, and unspoken promises exchanged without words. The attackers pressed in, relentless, unyielding. Marcello fired, moved, calculated, each second closer to disaster, each second testing their will, their courage, their bond. The villa shook under the onslaught, walls trembling, floors cracking. Sofia's cries pierced the storm, a high-pitched reminder of what was at stake, of what could be lost. Marcello's voice was calm but iron-hard. "Stay with her." Isabella nodded, pressing Sofia closer, whispering every word she could think of. Love, safety, protection, courage. The world outside was chaos, but inside, in that corner of the villa, a fragile cocoon of fear and determination held them together. Bullets tore through the windows, splintering glass in jagged shards. Sofia screamed for her mother, the sound slicing through the smoke-filled hall. Marcello's eyes blazed with fury, scanning, calculating, knowing the storm had arrived, and that the next seconds would decide everything. Perfect. Here's Chapter 7. The Blood Wedding, expanded into cinematic, emotional, third-person narration. How 250 lines, starting exactly where Chapter 6 ended, no repetition, maintaining suspense, dark romance, and ending with your requested cliffhanger. The villa was quiet now, though the air still carried the smell of gunpowder and smoke. Marcello's men worked silently, moving bodies, securing exits, and cleaning traces of chaos. The city beyond the gates remained oblivious, but here, inside these walls, every heartbeat thudded with danger and anticipation. Marcello knelt near the broken window, carefully checking the perimeter. Isabella pressed Sofia close, whispering soft reassurances, feeling he weight of both her daughter and the choice she had been forced to make. They were alive, yes, but nothing else felt certain. "We can't stay," Marcello said finally, his voice low, measured, unyielding. "Luca will come. The Rossis will come. They'll never stop until they have what they want." Isabella nodded, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. Her heart pounded not just with fear, but with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel, an undeniable awareness of how deeply she had come to care for the man who had saved her daughter, who had saved her. Marcello's eyes caught hers. There was a fierceness in them, tempered by exhaustion and unspoken longing. I have a plan, he continued. We make them think you and Sofia are dead. We hide you. New names, new lives. It's the only way to protect you. Her breath caught. Dead? Yes. His jaw tightened. To everyone outside these walls, you don't exist. You vanish. Until we are ready to strike back. The weight of the choice pressed down on her chest. She had fought to protect her daughter, to survive, to reclaim her life. And now, the path to safety required vanishing, erasing everything she had known. I can't, she whispered. I won't live like a shadow. I won't let Sofia grow up hiding in fear. Marcello approached her, hands firm but gentle on her shoulders. You won't be shadows, he said. You'll be ghosts to the world, but alive, together. That's what matters. And one day, when the time is right, we take back everything. Isabella's gaze softened, caught in the storm of his intensity. She wanted to hate him for the control, for the cold calculation, yet her heart betrayed her. She wanted to trust him, to lean into the safety he offered. The decision was made. Sofia would be safe. That night, the villa transformed into a cocoon of preparation. Costumes, new identities, and false papers were assembled. Marcello's men moved with precision, silent and lethal, every step planned to ensure that no one outside would know the truth. Hours passed in tense silence. Marcello remained vigile, not a guardian in a world that had become increasingly hostile. Isabella watched him, noting the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the faint tremor in his hands, and the way he never took his gaze off her daughter. Something shifted in her then, a realization of love, complicated, dangerous, and terrifying. She loved him in ways she hadn't permitted herself to admit. Yet fear and pride held her back. She could not let herself live completely in his shadows, no matter how tempting, no matter how safe. Marcello noticed the hesitation, the flicker of longing and resistance in her gaze. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know you care for me, he said, and I know you fear what that means. But right now, love won't save us, only survival. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid pulse of her heart. I understand. He studied her, a flash of emotion passing through his otherwise impenetrable expression. He extended his hand, formal, almost ceremonious. Then we make a dark alliance, protection, strategy, and trust, and, if you agree, a marriage. Not of love, yet, but of necessity. Her breath hitched, torn between defiance and surrender. A marriage? She asked softly. Yes, to bind us in law, in appearance, in the eyes of the world, so no one can touch you without facing me. His gaze locked with hers, steel and fire mixed with an unspoken promise. It's the only way. Isabella hesitated, weighing the risk against the safety it promised. The thought of Sofia being alive, untouched, drove her decision. She nodded, her resolve firm. Do it. Preparations began. A small chapel hidden beneath the villa's foundations was transformed with candles, low light flickering across stone walls. The air was thick with tension, anticipation, and unspoken desire. Marcello dressed in a tailored suit, crisp, black, the emblem of power and control. Isabella W. Or a simple, elegant gown, white, almost ethereal, yet practical for what lay ahead. Sofia clung to her mother, holding tightly, sensing the gravity of the moment even in her innocence. The ceremony began under candlelight. Marcello's men stood vigil, weapons hidden but ready, eyes scanning for threats, bodies taut with readiness. The atmosphere was solemn, charged with the fusion of strategy, desperation, and the faintest hint of passion. Marcello extended his hand to Isabella. Her eyes met his, and for a heartbeat, the world outside vanished. Their lives, their fears, their longing, all concentrated in this moment. I, Marcello Moretti, he intoned, voice low and commanding, take you, Isabella, as my wife, not for love alone, but for protection, for survival, for everything that binds us in this world of shadows and blood. Isabella's voice trembled, but was steady. I, Isabella, accept, not for love, not yet, but for the child, for survival, for the bond that keeps us alive. Their hands met, fingers intertwining, the act binding them more than words could convey. Every candle flickered, shadows danced across the walls, the air heavy with a strange mixture of fear, hope, and a tension that went beyond reason. Marcello's eyes softened for the briefest moment, and Isabella felt it. His humanity, buried beneath layers of power, violence, and calculation. Sofia clapped her small hands softly, unaware of the ceremony's significance, yet feeling the protective embrace of the two adults who had become her world. The vows ended. The air was still, waiting, tense with the weight of what had just occurred. Marcello leaned close to Isabella, whispering, "We'll survive. Together." She nodded, feeling warmth spread through her chest, mingled with fear and desire, and the quiet knowledge that their lives would never be the same. The candles flickered violently. A sudden shadow crossed the entrance to the chapel. The air shifted. A single gunshot rang through the space. The sound was deafening, echoing against stone walls, stopping every heartbeat in its path. Mark. Ello's body stiffened. His eyes widened in shock. Blood blossomed across the front of his suit. He stumbled forward, collapsing to the floor. Sofia screamed, small and terrified, clutching her mother. Isabella's heart stopped. She dropped to her knees beside him, trembling, horror spilling from her in waves. The men reacted instantly, weapons drawn, scanning the shadows for the shooter. The chapel erupted in chaos, candlelight flickering, the air thick with gunpowder and panic. Marcello's hand weakly reached for Isabella, eyes dark and unreadable, pain and fury mingling. The vows, the promises, the alliance, all shattered in a heartbeat, leaving only blood, fear, and the unknown. Marcello's chest heaved, blood spreading across the black fabric of his suit. Sofia screamed for him, Isabella's hands pressed desperately against him. Shadows loomed, and in the silence between heartbeats, the world outside the chapel waited, merciless, relentless, and ready to strike again. The villa was quiet now, a hollowed-out sanctuary ringing with the echo of spent bullets. The acrid scent of gunpowder and copper hung in the air, a ghost of the violence that had so nearly claimed them. Marcello remained kneeling by the shattered window, his profile a sharp, dark cutout against the bruised dawn light filtering through the broken glass. His stillness was not peace, but the coiled tension of a predator forced to retreat. Isabella held Sofia, the child's small body a trembling weight against her chest. Her whispers were a fragile incantation against the terror, soothing words meant for her daughter that did little to calm the frantic beat of her own heart. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go that his shadow did not already reach. "We can't stay." Marcello's voice was low, scraping over the silence like gravel. It was not a suggestion, but a verdict. Luca will go. Me. The Rossis will come. They'll never stop. Not until they have what they want, or until they believe it's lost to them forever. Isabella met his gaze, finding his eyes dark and unreadable, yet stripped of the impersonal coldness she'd seen in the hospital. Now they burned with a focused, terrifying heat. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "We make them think you are dead." The words fell between them, stark and absolute. "Both of you. We hide you. New names, new lives, far from this city. It's the only way to protect you." "Dead?" The word was a breath, a denial. To erase herself, to erase Sofia, to become a ghost in the world she had fought so hard to report on, to live in. "I can't," she whispered, a surge of defiance rising through the fear. I won't let her grow up as a shadow, Marcello. Hiding in fear is not living. He moved then, crossing the space between them in a few silent strides. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, their weight firm, grounding, yet not harsh. You won't be shadows, he said, his voice dropping, for her ears only. You'll be ghosts to the world, but alive, together. That is what matters. We make them look the other way, and when their guard is down, when they think they have won, we take back everything. His gaze held hers, a storm of will and promise. She saw the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes, the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the hand that still bore the smudge of someone else's blood. He was a fortress, but even fortresses could be worn down. In that moment, she saw not just the dawn, but the man, a man who had built walls so high he'd trapped himself inside, and who was now, for reasons she still barely understood, trying to tear one down for her. For them. The realization was a quiet, terrifying tremor in her soul. It was more than gratitude, more than the dangerous attraction that sparked between them in moments of chaos. It was a profound, complicated shift, a recognition of the fierce, damaged humanity beneath the legend, and a terrifying admission that she had seen home to care for it. He saw the conflict in her eyes, the war between her independent spirit and the primal need to keep her child safe. I know you care for me, he murmured, his breath a whisper against her temple. And I know you fear what that means. But right now, love is a luxury we cannot afford. It won't save us, only survival will. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of fear and longing. She pressed a hand to her chest as if to steady it. I understand. He studied her for a long moment, a flicker of something raw and unguarded in his depths, before the steel shutters came down once more. He extended his hand, not in a gesture of affection, but a formal, solemn pact. Then we make a dark alliance, protection, strategy, and trust, and— He paused, the words hanging in the charged air. A marriage. Not of love, not yet, but of necessity. The air left her lungs. A marriage? The word felt foreign on her tongue, a relic from a normal world that had ceased to exist. Yes, to bind us in law, in appearance, in the eyes of a world that respects such symbols. It makes you untouchable. To move against you is to move against me, directly, irrevocably. His gaze was unwavering, a blend of cold strategy and smoldering intensity. It is the only way to give you the armor you need. Isabella looked down at Sofia, who had quieted, her wide, trusting eyes watching the exchange. The child's safety was the only currency that mattered. Her own fears, her pride, her complicated feelings for this man, they were all secondary to the simple, terrifying truth that this might be the only path to a future. She drew a shaky breath, her resolve solidifying into something hard and unyielding. She placed her hand in his. Do it. The villa transformed into a hive of silent, efficient activity. His men, who moments before had been instruments of death, now became architects of a fragile future. False documents were procured from a hidden safe, their new names, Elena and Lucia Rossi, feeling like ill-fitting skins. A simple, elegant gown of ivory, silk, starkly out of place amidst the weaponry and marble, was laid out for her. It was a costume for the most important performance of their lives. Beneath the villa, hidden behind a false wall in the wine cellar, was a small stone-walled chapel. It was a relic from a more devout era, forgotten by time. Now it was illuminated by a dozen flickering candles that cast long, dancing shadows on the cold stone. The air was thick with the smell of wax and damp earth, a stark contrast to the opulence above. Marcello stood before a simple wooden cross, having changed into a suit of immaculate black. He was every inch the Don, yet his posture held a new gravity, a solemnity that went beyond the strategic. Isabella approached, the silk of the gown whispering against the stone floor. Sofia, holding the hand of a stern-faced Vince, watched with a child's solemn confusion. There were no guests, no music, only the silent armed witnesses of Marcello's most trusted men. Their presence was not celebratory. It was a guard detail, their eyes constantly scanning the shadows beyond the circle of candlelight. The man who officiated was not a priest, but an old, grizzled consigliere whose voice was a dry rasp. The words he spoke were a stripped-down, secular version of vows, devoid of God or sentiment, focusing only on bond and obligation. Marcello took her hands. His were warm, his grip firm. His eyes, in the flickering light, were pools of dark intensity. "I, Marcello Moretti," he began, his voice low and resonant in the small space, "take you, Isabella, as my wife, not for love alone, but for protection, for survival, for the future we must build from the ashes of this night. I bind my life to yours and to the child you protect. This is my vow, sworn on my blood and my name." The words were a shield, a weapon, a chain. They settled over her, heavy and final. Isabella's throat was tight. She looked from his fierce, determined face to Sofia's innocent one. "I, Isabella," she answered, her voice gaining strength as she spoke, "take you, Marcello, as my husband. Not for love, not yet, but for the safety of my daughter, for the alliance we forge in this shadow. I bind my life to yours, in trust and in this fight. This is my vow." There was no ring, only the press of their palms. The consigliere pronounced them bound. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the sputter of a candle. In that silence, the world narrowed to the space between them. The strategic facade cracked for a single, breathless moment. Marcello's gaze dropped to her lips, and the air grew thick with all the words unspoken, all the tension that had simmered since the alley. It was a current of pure, undiluted want, a dangerous acknowledgement of the real, human connection growing in the barren soil of their circumstances. He leaned in, and for a heartbeat she thought he would bridge the gap, that the pact would be sealed with something more than words. But he stopped, a hair's breadth away, his breath warm on her skin. The moment stretched, taut and electric, a promise of something that could not yet be. It was shattered by a sound that didn't belong. A soft scuff of a shoe from the entrance of the chapel, a shadow that moved wrong. Instinct, older than thought, made Marcello shove Isabella behind him, his body a shield between her and the threat. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. It was not the wild report of an assault rifle from the earlier attack, but the sharp, precise crack of a single, well-aimed pistol. Marcello's body jolted. A spray of crimson bloomed like a grotesque flower on the pristine white of his shirt, just beneath his shoulder. The force spun him halfway around. He didn't cry out, his eyes, wide with a shock that was as mucked. Each betrayal, as it was pain, found Isabella's for a fractured second before his legs buckled. He fell to the stone floor with a heavy, sickening thud. Chaos erupted. Vince roared, his gun appearing in his hand as he yanked Sofia back into the relative safety of a stone archway. Other men surged forward, weapons drawn, shouting, their voices a tangled web of panic and fury. Isabella was on her knees, the ivory gown pooling around her, now spattered with her husband's blood. Her hands fluttered over him, useless, terrified. Marcello! His name was a sob, torn from a place deep inside she hadn't known existed. His chest heaved, each ragged breath a struggle. The dark fabric of his suit jacket drank the blood, making the stain look black and endless. His hand twitched, fingers scraping against the cold stone as he tried and failed to push himself up. His face was ashen, his lips parting, but no sound came out. The fierce, unbreakable Don Marcello Moretti was brought low, not in a grand battle, but by a single, treacherous shot in a place meant for sanctuary. Sofia's scream pierced through the din, a high, thin sound of pure terror. "Uncle Mark!" Isabella looked up, her vision blurred by tears, and her eyes locked with Vince's across the chaos. His face was a mask of fury and grim realization. His gaze flickered from the fallen Marcello to the shadowed entrance of the chapel, and then back to her, and in that look was a terrifying truth. The shooter wasn't an outsider who had breached their defenses. The bullet had come from within. The betrayal was not from an enemy at the gate, but from a hand that had once sworn loyalty. As Isabella cradled Marcello's bleeding head in her lap, her tear-filled eyes swept the room and landed on Vince, whose own weapon was now drawn, but not aimed at the door. Instead, it was held loosely at his side, his expression an unreadable mask of grief and fury. From the darkness behind him, a figure stepped fully into the candlelight, the traitorous pistol still smoking in his hand. It was the consigliere, the man who had just officiated their vows, his eyes cold and empty, as he calmly raised the gun again, this time aiming not at Marcello, but directly at Isabella. The silence after the gunshot was a physical presence, thick and heavy with the smell of cordite and copper. Luca Moretti lay sprawled on the expensive Persian rug, a dark, widening stain haloing his head. His eyes, once bright with cunning and spite, were fixed on the ceiling, seeing nothing. The pistol felt like a block of ice in Isabella's hand, her fingers still curled rigidly around the trigger. Her breath sawed in her throat, each gasp a burn. Marcello moved first. He didn't look at his brother's body. His eyes were only for Isabella, for the tremors racking her frame. In 2 long strides he was before her, his large, capable hand enveloping hers, gently prying the weapon from her frozen grip. His touch was not that of a crime lord, but of a husband, a partner. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice low and steady, an anchor in her storm. She dragged her gaze from Luca's body to his face. "You did what you had to do. You protected our family." The word was a shattered thing. He didn't let her finish. He turned her away from the grim scene, his body a shield between her and the consequences of her action. "Listen to me now. This is what happens next." His plan was formed in the space of a heartbeat, cold, precise, and born of a love that was finally, fully acknowledged. "The police will be here. They will find him. And they will find me here, with the gun." Isabella's head whipped up, horror dawning. "No, Marcello, no, I won't let you." "You will," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. He pressed the gun back into her hand, then carefully wrapped his own around it, transferring his prints over hers. It was an act of profound sacrifice, an erasure of her crime, and an assumption of her burden. "This is the only way. They have nothing on me that will stick. But you, they would destroy. They would take you from Sofia. I will not allow that. Not ever." Tears she hadn't known she was crying streamed down her face. "Marcello." He cupped her cheek, his thumb smearing a tear track. The gesture was unbearably tender. "This is my vow, the one I meant in that chapel. I protect what is mine. You are mine. She is mine. Now let me do this." The sound of distant sirens cut through the night, growing steadily closer. A tipped call, an anonymous warning, it didn't matter. The machine was in motion. He gave her one last, long look, a silent conversation passing between them, gratitude, love, and a dark, unbreakable promise. Then he turned and walked calmly to the grand chair by the fireplace, sitting as if awaiting a business meeting, the murder weapon resting on the table beside him. Isabella fled to the safe room with Sofia, clutching her daughter as the villa was flooded with blue and red lights, as voices shouted, as handcuffs clicked shut around the wrists of the man who had chosen to build a prison around himself to keep them free. The months that followed were a study in gray. The legal battle was fierce and expensive, a whirlwind of motions and delays. Marcello's lawyers, the best money could buy, chipped away at the flimsy evidence. The gun had only his prints. There was no motive the prosecution could prove. The case, built on sand, began to crumble. Isabella testified, her voice steady, her eyes meeting his across the courtroom, a thread of steel connecting them. She was no longer just a journalist or a mother. She was the wife of Marcello Moretti, and she had learned to wield her own kind of power. The day of the dismissal, the lack of evidence finally acknowledged, was quiet. There were no cameras, no cheering crowds. Marcello simply walked out of the side door of the courthouse, a free man. He didn't speak to the press. He got into a waiting car and gave a single, quiet command. Home. The villa had changed. It was no longer just a fortress, it was a home. Sofia's toys were scattered in the sunlit living room, colorful and alive. Isabella was standing by the window, having watched the car ascend the long driveway, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The front door opened. He stood there, thinner, his face more lined, but his eyes held the same storm, now tempered with a profound peace. He was home. Before he could take another step, a small blur of motion shot past Isabella. "Daddy!" Sofia launched herself across the marble floor, her little legs pumping, her arms flung wide. The word, so simple, so absolute, shattered the last of his defenses. Marcello dropped to one knee, catching her as she crashed into him, her small arms locking around his neck with a force that stole his breath. "Daddy," she whispered again, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her, his own eyes squeezing shut, his large hand cradling the back of her head. It was a word he had never dreamed of hearing, a title more powerful than any other. Don. Boss. They were nothing. This was everything. Over Sofia's shoulder, his gaze found Isabella's. She had walked closer, her movements graceful and sure. She did not smile. Her expression was something far deeper, far more ancient. It was a look of possession, of a bond forged in blood and sacrifice, tested by fire and law, and found unbreakable. Her hazel eyes held his, and in their depths was a dark promise of forever, a promise of a shared future, a shared empire, a shared life, no matter what shadows it held. He rose, Sofia clinging to him like a koala, and stepped toward his wife. He reached for her, his hand finding the curve of her waist, pulling her into the circle of his other arm. They stood there, the three of them, a tangled, breathing monument to survival. He lowered his forehead to rest against Isabella's, and for a long, silent moment, the world was perfect. It was whole, the past was buried. The future was theirs. The moment was shattered by the soft, definitive sound of the mail slot clicking shut in the front door. A single thick, cream-colored envelope slid onto the polished floor. It lay there, innocuous and menacing. There was no return address. Emblazoned on its front, stamped in blood-red wax, was a crest none of them recognized, a serpent coiled around a thorned crown. Isabella pulled back slightly, her eyes darting from Marcello's face to the envelope. He didn't need to open it to know its message. The piece had been an illusion, a fleeting breath between storms. His arms tightened around his wife and daughter, his voice a low, grim rumble that vibrated through them both. "The war isn't over,"